Hey guys, I'm Andrews with Atom Audio, and today we're going to be talking about how to build your business and build your brand as an audio engineer and producer. So today we are with Sean Giovanni of the record shop here in Nashville. Sean, if you want to give a little backstory of how the record shop came to be.
I would say that the story of the record shop started when I was a kid, and I first fell in love with the idea of why music and the sound of music made me feel a certain way when I would listen to it, and the emotional impact of the instruments and the sounds that a production created. My dad was a huge fan of all different kinds of music, and whenever we were in the car together, he would always have this different CD on or some different music, and I mean, it was across the board of like every genre you can imagine. And some of it I really liked, some of it I was like, oh, will you turn this off? This is lame, you know? But all of it was a really great education in music. And then I started, as I got a little older, starting to recognize like how music would different types of songs and different genres of music would impact me in different sort of environments. So in middle school, I saved up some money and I bought a couple turntables to learn how to DJ. And then I bought a little 4-track cassette recorder and started to learn really basic, like, you know, engineering, just kind of recording some of my own like ideas and stuff. And eventually that grew into this idea that you could make a living doing this. And so that led me to a small recording school in Minneapolis, and then I decided to move to Nashville. I moved to Nashville to work at a major studio here in town. And the deal was that I'd come into town, I would intern there for a few weeks, and as long as I didn't screw anything up, there was a potential to get a gig as one of the assistant engineers. So I got there and I showed up the first day, and they asked me for this internship paperwork, and it turns out that my school didn't have a program that was applicable to that specific record label's internship program. And there was no way around it. They just weren't able to help me work through this miscommunication. And it led to me kind of just being stuck. It was the greatest job that I never got because it led to me having to figure it out. And I moved to town in a very challenging time in the recording industry. Record budgets were declining. Commercial studios were having a tough time staying open. And there wasn't much traditional employment really available at studios. And but all of that I think was really great. It's not like a sad story or anything, because I was gonna figure out how to make this happen one way or another. So when I realized that the whole like internship, working your way up, staff job at a studio wasn't really in the cards for the period of time that I moved here, I dove right into building my own client base through going out to songwriter nights, meeting artists, and connecting with people. And I found that I was really passionate about being able to choose who I worked with, and that it really was possible to at that time, make a modest living, being able to, just record kind of up and coming artists and, singer-songwriters. But I had a bigger vision for what I wanted to create. And I recognized that without the apprenticeship idea of working at a major studio that would put you in that environment, or without just a really lucky break of coming across like the right artist at the right time that you just end up exploding with, I needed to build a reputation for and a brand as a producer. And I got this idea that if I could create a unique brand around the work that I did, that it would allow me maybe a little more like legitimacy to start to build relationships with artists at a little bit of a higher level, and get them to trust me that like maybe I haven't had that opportunity of like that big breakout just yet when I had started, but here's my philosophy and here's how I want to serve you. And I was really fortunate. It led to some really great opportunities. So as that client list started to build, and that idea, the concept started to build, I needed to turn that into some sort of tangible business. And that's what the record shop became. And my idea was to create a multifaceted production company that would support artists in a variety of ways beyond the recording, where I could handle production, I could handle engineering, mixing, programming, anything that had to do with the audio side of things. But then I would have a team of people that would help artists with content creation, with promotion, with marketing, with building out websites, and all the things that someone might need support, and help with. And having that versatility has allowed me to be able to have a really exciting and comfortable, career, being able to just focus on making great records with people that are great to hang out with and music that I love.
So when it comes to being an engineer, I mean, the first step is to be good at your work and be personable in the studio. But when it comes to building your brand and kind of building your client list, I mean, how important is it to legitimize yourself as a businessman and to build your brand in that way, rather than just being good at recording an acoustic guitar?
Well, I think it depends on your personality and what sort of career you're looking for in the industry. The one really big lesson that I learned in business early on, or at least in getting work and starting to build a career, was that it was more than just being really good at the equipment. Because I moved to town after excelling in an audio program, thinking that I was like kind of one of the best people in my class. I put in all the work. I was working at studios while I was in school. I had a lot of experience. I'm going to come to Nashville and be far ahead of all the other people that just graduated, and I'm going to get some great opportunities, and I'm going to work hard for them. But I felt like I had put in the work to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And then I was very quickly brought down to earth by having a challenge being able to find employment or find work. And one of the things that I recognized was that in my opinion, I was too willing to do anything rather than being very clear about what I was good at. So I would contact studios looking for internships. I'd contact producers that might need an assistant, and I would give them what the school told me to do. Give them your resume, tell them a little bit about your experience, and see if they have any opportunities. Well, now being a studio owner, I recognize that there's not a ton of value in that because there's hundreds of people if not thousands of people that are graduating every semester from all these different schools that are looking for the same thing. And if I get dozens of emails a week and every one of them looks exactly the same, there's just not the time, or I'm not gonna take the time or energy to go through there and interview every single person to figure out who's a good fit. So what I learned through a specific experience was that if I could showcase what was unique about me, and then I could find the individuals where that skill set would be of value to, as opposed to just looking for just some entry-level opportunity and willing to do everything. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be willing to do everything. I was absolutely willing to do whatever was asked of me, but I wasn't able to articulate to someone what it was that I could bring of value to them. Mm-hmm. I was really just asking for something as opposed to coming with with a solution or with help. So I took that to heart and thought, how else can I show these specific skill sets that I have to people to be able to showcase what level of value I could bring rather than just asking for an opportunity. And then that completely changed the messages that I was sending, the conversations that I had, and it immediately led to more opportunities. So I would say that'd be a great way to start with, is by finding the niche thing or the skill that you have that would set you apart, that then you can sort of market yourself around. It's not as easy to market as a creative person because, musicians aren't, the whole business thing just doesn't feel totally natural, to all of us. That's kind of why we're musicians, because we didn't want to get a real job, But there's a lot of competition in this industry, and we have to be able to set ourselves apart and showcase the value of what we can do. I think one of the other really big assets to look at when you're building your brand is, what is your mission behind what you're creating, and how are you serving your artists in a unique way? Or what is the philosophy behind how you approach production? One of my somewhat unique philosophies was the idea of spending a lot of time in preparation with artists, which isn't a unique thing for most producers, but would be a unique thing for a freelance engineer. No. And so I would be asking more questions in the preparation for a project about the types of records that the artists like, the type of sounds that they're going for. Those things seem sort of obvious if you're, a producer, but when I was in school, no one told me those things. They just said, go and look for work and try to find a gig, and then, you do your technical skill set. Mm-hmm. So one of the ways to build a brand or a reputation from a business side with an engineer is figuring out what that philosophy is that's unique to you. And that's what led to the motto of the record shop, is serving the artist's artistic vision. And that was a big way for me to be able to kind of differentiate, as when you look at a traditional recording studio versus a production company that's going to go a little more in depth with the artists.
So when it comes to building your business as an audio engineer, you obviously need to start collecting gear, like you said. Mm-hmm. What was that process like for you? Was it, buying a preamp first, an interface? Kind of what are the first steps that you would suggest to people that are, trying to start their own business as an audio engineer and producer?
I think the first thing to look at is the type of music that you're going to be working on most often. So if it's pop music, for example, then you might want to focus more on the in-the-box side of things and a really high-end audio converter if you're just building in-the-box tracks, may not be as great of an investment as a bunch of plugins that will help you to be able to create other sounds. Now, if you're working a lot with like singer-songwriters or like rock bands, then there may be a different type of equipment that would be more beneficial or provide more value to what you can do. So I would say look first at like the general like average of the type of stuff that you're working on, and then the way that I looked at it was, what is the one piece of gear that's going to make the biggest difference in the quality of what I'm creating? And so for me, the first thing that I looked for was a really great vocal mic, because in my small studio that I started with, I had a little interface, I had an iMac, and I had a MIDI keyboard, and that was kind of the extent of my equipment, and a pretty cheap like condenser microphone. So I found that I was recording a lot of pop artists, a lot of hip hop artists, and a lot of singer-songwriters, and most of that was really just focused on recording vocals. So I knew that the biggest way that I could up the value of what I was creating and the quality was to be able to invest in a higher-end vocal mic. So I saved up and bought a Neumann U87. That was the first like higher end vocal mic that I got. Pretty standard, like straight ahead mic that works great on on a lot of different types of voices, and was affordable within the range of the higher end sort of stuff that you'd look for. Then after that, I noticed that I needed to be able to capture acoustic instruments a little bit better. So I got a pair of Neumann KM 184s. And was able to increase like the singer-songwriter type stuff. Then the next step was to look at like converters and the interface that I was using, and upgrading the computer that I had to have more RAM and processing power. And so I just looked at what are the things that are going to make my workflow more efficient and they're going to make the quality of what I'm doing better. And I just focused kind of one piece of gear at a time.
As you've kind of built your studio setup from the humble apartment studio to this, how have you kind of evolved your rates over time to kind of A, attract clients, but B, make a living as well?
That can be a really challenging thing to figure out as an engineer, especially when you're starting out. And for me, I started by setting a rate that was low enough that it could definitely be afforded by artists that were just getting, started, so I could generate enough work to stay busy. But then I needed to figure out how to be able to increase that as time went on. One of the things was investing in equipment. So if the people that you're working with that are around you see you putting the money that they're spending back into equipment, back into investing into the business and giving them a higher quality product, it's a lot easier conversation when you come to them and say, hey, I'm raising my rates by 10% this year or something like that. And they could see, well, man, they've put all kinds of money and time into building the quality of what they're doing, and so I can see how that that's worth that. Then some people aren't going to come along, and the one thing is that you need to be okay with that, because in order to grow, you're probably going to lose some people along the way, and that's totally okay. That was something that was really challenging for me to get over. I would start to try to like negotiate with people and be like, well, I guess for you, I could keep doing that, and but if there's not a long-term value in it, and it's just them trying to get like the cheapest option, they're probably not going to stick around that long anyway. Yeah. But it's a pretty deep conversation and like debate to figure out exactly how to approach raising the rates. The one thing that I would say is that for the most part, it's really good to set a specific value for yourself. And so the idea of like just strictly like working for free for exposure until you can have enough of a resume to be able to warrant charging people something, I don't think really like works long term, because you have to set some sort of value. But what I did was set a value that was low enough that it could be affordable to the modest, humble artist that's just getting started out, but still setting a value for that. Now, there were some times where I agreed to do things on spec, but I would do them with certain stipulations. So if I'm going to work for free, for example, then there would be some sort of like back-end ownership, whether it's publishing or royalties, or a deferred payment that was written out in a contract, something like that. And that's a little bit further on along your career where you're kind of in a position to do that. But another thing that I did, if I saw a specific opportunity where it could be more of a collaborative effort, and I saw a longer term potential in building a relationship through just maybe helping someone out with something or doing something on a smaller scale and not necessarily charging for it, I would definitely be open to doing that. But what I did in those scenarios was I would still send them an invoice, and I would just say, hey, like for my records, I just have to keep track of all this stuff. So I'm just sending you this over so it's in my system. But I just zeroed out the invoice. And then they saw what they would have had to pay if I was charging them of, you know, my rate for the work that I was doing. And I think that it's a subtle way to be able to say, like, you know, hey, this is the value of what you're getting, and I'm totally happy right now to invest my time, you know, into you. But I think it helps people appreciate it a little bit more, rather than just thinking, oh, I'm getting this for free because I talked this guy into working for nothing, you know. And so it's really just something that you gauge on a case-by-case scenario when you first get started. But I will say that there were some pretty incredible relationships and some pretty huge records that I worked on that came out of me just saying, yeah, sure, come over and I'll help you out with this thing. But it was definitely a focused thing of deciding who would be the right people to, you know, to do that with and, you know, offer it to.
So the record shop studio is on your property and it's, you know, 20-second walk away. How do you kind of maintain a work-life balance when you have your studio right here in your living space, like right there?
Well, I've come up with a system for that, but early on it was really challenging because you're building your career, you're really taking on anything that will come your way. You don't want to miss out on an opportunity. You know that if you say no to something, that somebody else is going to get that gig, and it's not that you miss that gig, you might miss the next 10 gigs because you weren't available for it. So there was definitely a period of time where it was really challenging, and I would say nearly impossible to have like a really strong balance. But as my career grew, I was able to have a little more flexibility to bring on other people. So it wasn't that I was missing, or the company wasn't missing an opportunity. It's just that maybe I wouldn't be on the session, but I could get another engineer, you know, to do it. And that's allowed me to have a little bit more balance. And eventually I figured out that I needed to find a system because working 16, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week just wasn't sustainable for the rest of my life. So once you're in a position where you're kind of, you know, where you're there, or if you're wanting to get to that place, I think it's really good to try to create a system for how you manage your time and what time you're dedicating to your work. So the way that I've arranged this personally now is that the first thing that I did was I set a specific like amount of working hours that I was gonna have throughout the week. And I made those hours not just when I'm gonna be in the studio, but just when I'm gonna be working on my business or my career in general. So whether I have a session or not, I have like office hours, you know, where I'm working. And those hours are from 9 a.m. to around 8 or 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. So if you're dependent upon where someone's at in their career, you know, you find the middle ground, you know, within that. But I set those hours. Then I fill in the calendar throughout the week or as things come up with the actual sessions that we're doing. So I have those laid out on the calendar. I know that I'm going to be doing that at that time. If someone isn't full-time in the industry yet, then they have their like part-time job hours, you know, whatever their side hustle is that they're, you know, that they got that's helping them, you know, pay their bills. You got those hours that are defined to that. And then I look at what's the rest of my time that's left. So after I have my, every Sunday, I look over my schedule and I see wherever there's holes and blocks in it. And then I have a list of short-term actions that I can take to move towards my long-term goals. So it might be making a connection with someone new. It might be working on some new content. It might be researching some new equipment. It might be practicing something that I wanted to get better at using. And any of those things, I have this whole list and I add to that list. So it just sort of sits on my calendar. And then I grab one thing and I put at least one thing on each day. And I set aside the specific amount of time to knock that out. And then over time, as I started to see how this would allow me to be able to stay more present within like my priorities and be able to work towards things more effectively, I started to expand that. So now when you look at my calendar, from 9 a.m. to like 9 p.m., it is full, whether I have a session or not. Now, usually there's sessions going on, but whenever there's a break, I'll have one of those things that's on there that I'll knock out. So that's allowed me to feel more comfortable with like not working on the weekends for the most part. Instead I have a specific scenario where somebody's in from out of town and we got to keep, you know, working. But for the most part, I work Monday through Friday, which was a huge step, you know, to get. And it's not that I don't want to work, it's that I recognize that your mind and your body needs a break. And even when I'm, you know, not there, I'm still thinking about, you know, my work and thinking about my business. But you need to get out of the room and get some sunshine and just refresh, you know. So by creating that schedule and that system in that way, I was able to find a balance in the sense of my mindset that would allow me to remove myself from the studio environment and be able to refresh without feeling guilty about, like, you know, not not working. And it's also allowed me to stay more motivated and to continue to grow and more optimistic when adversity comes, because I can look back at all of those things that were accomplished throughout the week that were outside of like just sessions, but the things that I'm doing to move my career forward or to move my artists' careers forward. And I can look at those small wins and be really excited about them. So even if like a certain like deal doesn't go through or something breaks down in the studio and it's like a stressful week, I still have those things to look at that were like, yeah, well, I accomplished this week and that feels pretty good. And as you do that over time, you want to get that feeling more often. So then I think naturally it helps you become a more maybe organized or maybe focused person, because you're getting that immediate result from the impact that those little wins are having. So I hear people say, well, yeah, like I don't really like that type of like structure and like understand 100%. But do you want to be able to do this for a living? There's got to be some type of business involved in it in some sense of being able to manage your time. And I find that process to be a really effective way and creative way of doing it without it overwhelming or having like too much structure. It can still be flexible in some ways, but you have a really strong starting point to know where you're basing your focus on.
You mentioned that when you started this whole business that you found your niche. So is that something that you look for when an apprentice or aspiring apprentice reaches out to you via email? Kind of what catches your eye and like what makes them stand out, I guess, if you're getting 30 plus emails every month about internships?
Yeah, if someone's looking for an internship at a studio or an apprenticeship with me, I really recommend being clear on why you're contacting that specific person, what it is that you're really good at. So what skill sets you're excited about and that you've spent a lot of time working on, because that tells us what type of value you could provide. And making sure that it doesn't feel like a copy and paste sort of email. Even if a majority of the content is, because I understand you want to be efficient with sending out these messages, because you're going to have to send out dozens if not hundreds of them before you get an opportunity probably. At least start it with something that is personable and personal to the person that you're reaching out to, and why you're doing that. And I think that it also depends on who you're messaging. So if you're messaging someone like me, where like you've seen an interview with me or read a blog or listened to a podcast that I've done, like mention something about like why you wanted to reach out. If it's a studio that you would really love to work at, like why do you want to work there? Does it have to do with the equipment that they have? Did they work on a certain record there that you love? Just make it a little bit more personable to what they're doing. And this can be the most challenging thing, but figure out maybe some unique way that you could give them the idea of how you could be valuable to them without expecting anything in return. Now, this is super challenging when you have nothing happening yet, when your resume isn't built, but maybe there's something that they've tried to start doing. Maybe it doesn't even have to do with engineering. Maybe it's their social media account like sucks, and you could help them with that because you've built a great following on social media. Or maybe you're good at like holding a camera or like doing something creative, with content. And so there's other ways that you could start to earn opportunities and gain respect from someone outside of just that, that one specific thing as well. And so there's not one size fits all for every scenario, but I think those are some ideas that could be helpful when you're looking for an opportunity like that.
So thank you guys for watching. Sean, if you want to give a little bit more info on how you can find out more about your studio and your blog and everything else on The Record Shop.
Absolutely. Yeah, just go to therecordshopnashville.com and send me an email, and I'd be happy to talk to you. And if anyone is looking for help, support, guidance, just someone to share their goals with, I'm more than happy to help. Don't hesitate to drop me a line. I know how challenging it is to get your career going. Even if your career is already, flowing, we all have those moments of like where we're just trying to figure things out, And I want to be a resource for people and connect with people that have a passion for creating music. I know how challenging it was when I started to be able to find good, mentors and friends and people to grow with. So I'm all about, helping. No purchase required. Just drop me a line, and I'm happy to help you out. And then our community on social media, Instagram and Facebook and all the the places is a lot of fun. We love meeting new people and learning what other people are doing. So hit us up there, and we'd love to hear from you.
It's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for doing this video with us. I think our community will find it very engaging and very helpful. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this.